everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Revenue Focused Marketer, where we discuss anything and everything related to marketing as well as data. Today's guest is someone who's not just talking about growth, he's engineering it with one of the most complex traditional spaces out there, which is higher education. Welcome to the show, Brent. It's great to have you here today. Just a little bit about him. He is the Chief Marketing Officer at National American University, and he's had decades of experience across growth marketing, branding, SaaS, and Brent stepped into higher education and helped drive NAU's first positive enrollment and financial trajectory. He's definitely a proven operator who's really seen marketing and is only not even just focused on storytelling, but building system thinking. So in this episode, we hope to unpack the shift that is really happening in the US higher education. And we're here to talk about technologies that are really disrupting the space. So let's get started. I guess my first question for you would be, from SaaS and startups to university turnaround, what kind of pulled you into the world of higher education?
It started long ago. I'm not going to tell you how long ago, but it was a couple of decades plus, as an admissions rep at the University of Phoenix. And so that was really my first foray into what would, I learned later become the name proprietary higher education, but I was too inexperienced at the time, being so young, fresh kind of out of college, to know the difference. I just really assumed everybody went to college the way I went to college, which is that's the step that you take after you finish high school. And that's kind of a privileged assumption. And I became, learned very quickly, being on the floor as an admissions rep, that I was talking to adults. I wasn't talking to, 18, 19-year-old recent high school graduates very often. I was talking to 30-somethings with kids, working moms that were single. So that, was a lesson that came quickly, is that what they need, what they want, and how you need to approach them in order to listen to the challenge and then appeal to their opportunity and show them a path that may not always be clear, is a little bit of a different approach than somebody who's very young, who just assumes that they're going to get into, either a community college and that's the path they're going to go, or go to a traditional 4-year, live on campus and have that experience. And that was really my first foray into, higher education space, especially on the proprietary side, on the online side. And that's been what I've done since then, is just working with multiple types of institutions. But traditionally, it's been either fully online or institutions that are trying to go online. And a lot of them were forced to, a few years ago during COVID. But and what people don't really realize is there's a significant difference between online institutions that are good at being online institutions and online institutions that are really just ground campuses that use a LMS system to complement their classroom teaching.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you've definitely seen a lot in this space. So let's talk about, what's really changing nowadays. I think AI is already making a tangible difference in pretty much every space today. Every industry is being touched. So I'd love to hear your perspective about how is the, education system or university system really changing with this new technology that's out there.
Yeah, so AI to me, just where we are right now, it takes me back, again, I'm going to go back to 20, 25 years ago. Dating myself. Okay, so if you call online emergence, so I'm still lineal, so overlapping lineal and Gen X. So I grew up with a computer in my house and a computer in my in K-12, but it was the old school. So I'm talking Carmen San Diego. Where in the world is she playing that playing that game? And so when I got to college, you were still on dial-up, but you would use a computer to submit, papers, write the papers and things like that. And
Yeah.
online as an educational tool was new. And
Mm-hmm.
University of Phoenix, again, as a pioneer in that vertical, was probably shunned, let's be honest here. It was frowned upon. And
Mm-hmm.
so online is a tool in the same way AI is a tool. And so I see the move towards implementation and adoption of AI becoming ubiquitous. It's just a tool, and how well you use that tool and the platform and vertical in which you use that tool is what matters. Is there
Mm-hmm.
potential for it to be used in a destructive or negative manner? Absolutely. The same thing is true with online. It's the same thing with any tools. A hammer, something that hits nails, or is a hammer a weapon? It's the
Yeah.
same. And so I think where people get really kind of confused about what AI is and what its potential is they tend to do the human thing, which is look at the potential negative as opposed to the potential
Mm-hmm.
opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's a little frustrating. And so if you want to go down a rabbit hole on the potential negative, then I think something that can make you feel better is looking at the replacement paradox or the automation paradox, where if really AI is out there and it's just this destructive force that's going to replace every human's job, who's going to be
Mm-hmm.
left with money and do anything in the economy? So that's a really interesting paradox to look at. I don't think that's true. I think what you're going to see is as resistant as higher education was to online, and now
Mm-hmm.
ubiquitous and everybody does it, you're seeing resistance to AI in the classroom in some pockets or how people are using it. But I think it's just us figuring out how to actually optimize that tool. And that's on the
Mm-hmm.
learning side. I think on the operational and the marketing side, it's a great enhancer. I use it daily. In fact, I wouldn't be able to do my job right now. I would have to hire probably 3 or 4 more people for content
Yeah.
creation, writing, concept idea, just running problems through it. And I think it's a great tool for that. But on the marketing side, where it gets a little uncertain for me, is really on how it's becoming integrated so much in the way we look for information and interact with information.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll tell you, I think right now, if you go ahead and just run a Google search or a Bing search, you're going to see top results are usually AI, right? But those are free.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I'm waiting for the moment here where Google's going to figure out a way to monetize that. They just will.
Oh,
Uh,
definitely.
yeah, so it might be sponsored content at the top. But what I do know is that AI represents just an evolution of how are we going to interact with media, how are we going to interact with information, where do we get our information,
Mm-hmm.
and how we source that and make sure that's what we're looking for. AI is much better at that than the old search engine results page. So
Mm-hmm.
for the marketers out there where a website is still kind of your window into your organizational soul, I think marketers
Mm-hmm.
have to be of the mind that, okay, it's great to have great stories. That's never going to change. It's great that you focus on getting your content that human connectivity. I think there's a premium on the human connection that's going to start to become more valuable. But you have to
Mm-hmm.
optimize your site with content and put it both in the way the human sees it, which is great, specific content that the search engine can see. But you also have to have your
Mm-hmm.
schema on the code side right. So you have to actually make sure that your site is developed in a way that the search engine is going to see and say, okay, my schema is right, the content's right. This
Mm-hmm.
is the best thing that I can serve up, because the AI is still surfing the web on the back of Bing, on the back of Google. It's not its own search engine. It's just optimizing the way search is done.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the way we used to search is not ever going to stay the same anymore. Even for myself, just from being able to Google everything, now it's become ChatGPT or some other tool. And Google's definitely losing that spot when it comes to the default place where one goes to search. And I think in terms of marketing, this is really gonna change the whole SEO game, right? We were so focused on backlinking and getting our citations there, and I think the whole EEAT is still gonna stay relevant, but now it's pretty much about are these AI tools even recognizing your business and recognizing the work that you're doing? So for marketers out there that, are struggling figuring this space out, do you have any advice for them? And how are you kind of keeping up with the changing space of search?
Yeah, so I still will go back to great content is great content is great content. We're inspired by stories and connective human nature, right? We're tribal by nature. We want to be connected to somebody else, and AI doesn't necessarily give us, that. So there's two things that I think are important. At least this is my opinion on it. I don't want to be a researcher or misrepresent, but I do see a premium coming where people are going to want to know if they're talking to AI or they're talking to a real human. And you see semblance of this. You see, specks of this. If you go just, back in time a little bit here on calling in to customer support. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Frustrating is it if you can't get a human on the phone? And so you're waiting and you're hitting, dial, you're hitting button, trying to get a connection. And I think what you're going to see is a kind of a revolt. If everything is AI, everything is a fake person on the phone, everything is an AI automated person. I use a platform that creates avatars, AI avatars, and it speaks for me, and it's great. But I don't know if people are going to be accepting of that. And so there's a theory you can read about called the uncanny valley, and it's this it's this test of at what point does a automation or a robot give you the creeps as a human, right? And it turns out there's a real specific point where that happens. I see that human connectivity, human stories that connect A and B, connect you and I together, are going to be at a premium. They're still going to be the thing that matters the most. And so when you go to do your marketing, figure out your story, figure out what narrative that you're trying to tell, find the need, fill the need. Right? It's what somebody wants. This is what we provide. Now, going about execution is about meeting them where they're at. And to the point you made, how you might search generationally using just the AI on your phone, like, Hey Siri or Hey Google or whatever it might be, is maybe different than the generation that came before you or so on and so forth. And it's probably going to be different than the generation after. So you have to have your execution of how you get in front of people for that customer journey really mapped out, really understood. Where are my people at? And so in the application space, there's the demand gen where I want to generate leads, but you have to meet somebody. If they don't know who you are and don't know what you do, you got to tell them a story. You got to inspire them. Why are we different? Why are we unique? So understand the whole customer journey, and understand, particularly in higher education, you're not just dealing with an instant gratification product. You're dealing with a journey. You're dealing with somebody who might have already tried this and maybe not finished the degree, and they might be a little bit fickle. So what are you going to say to them? How are you going to approach them that can encourage them, motivate them, help them overcome obstacles and concerns early in the process, and then get them to the point where they're willing to engage and finally talk to somebody about getting a solution to move to that next phase of their career opportunity.
Definitely. No, that's really insightful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think I kind of want to zoom out a little bit and talk about a very looming question. Are universities still preparing students for the world they're actually graduating into? This is something that, whenever I talk about education, higher education today, and sort of the value of education today, this is something that kind of keeps coming up. And we're clearly seeing a shift everywhere, like, skill-based hiring, micro-credentials, remote-first companies, and now, AI accelerating everything again. So it feels like the goalpost kind of just keeps moving. And, I would love to learn, like, where's your, what's your kind of opinion about this? Do you think, at least in the US, universities are able to kind of keep up?
Yeah, so I've worked in both, the US market and more in the European market with a Swiss institution. And so there's a lot to unpack in this question, and I'm going to kind of break it into two parts, but I'm going to give you my answer, which is
Yeah.
duplicitous. And I admit it's yes,
Yeah.
it is, and no, it's not. And both
Uh-huh.
those things can be absolutely true. And so I'll
Uh-huh.
give you some examples of each. I think where we're failing to connect the dots for a lot of potential students, a lot of people that are out there. I mean, there's an article I can send you where I did some research last year, and around 40 million um, Americans, U.S. people, have
Uh-huh.
some college but no degree. I
Oh,
mean, there's
wow.
a lot of people who get almost to the promised land and not quite, right? So
Oh, yeah.
what do they have? They have a bunch of credit hours, okay,
Uh-huh.
but they don't necessarily have a credential. And if you look back in time, I will bet a generation prior to the micro credentials, the badging, and all the things that we're trying to do now in higher education, particularly at NAU, to
Mm-hmm.
show milestone progression that can be demonstrated on the resume, people
Mm-hmm.
were, I would say, castigated or wearing that scarlet letter that I have some credits, but I don't have a degree. They wouldn't even put it on their resume that they've
Yeah.
earned Y and Z credit hours because the stigma was, well, you start but you can't finish. And so from an employer's perspective, that's not great. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a disservice because it becomes a question of if somebody has 90 credit hours and another
Yeah.
candidate has, zero,
Uh-huh.
why wouldn't you say this person has a lot more training in ways that maybe the other person doesn't? And I think that's
Uh-huh.
what the disconnect is for a lot of people out there is what is it really getting me? Now, I
Uh-huh.
think there's a whole lot of other factors that impact this, including socioeconomic, cultural, political, where higher education, particularly degree programs, have become devalued. Some of that is intentional. Some of it is absolutely the fault of higher education in itself because it's a bit of a closed system where, we like what we do. We talk about lifelong learning. The Carnegie credit hour is gospel, and you have to have 3 or 4.5 or whatever your system is. And each credit has contact hours, and you can't show mastery. You have to show that you've done the work with the faculty member, and then you can demonstrate that learning. These are all great things. But there's a lot of people out there who have experience in the professional vertical or just a life vertical, military, things like that, that don't realize
Yeah.
that they actually turn that experience into credit hours. And we do a good job of that in NAU. We have a great platform for that. We don't want you to feel like you're being punished for not going to school because you went to school, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I
That's
think that's where
amazing.
higher education has kind of maybe lost its way a little bit. And if you want to
Mm-hmm.
do an interesting exercise, I've done this multiple times with different AI models. Go on GPT or whatever your favorite model is and ask it
Mm-hmm.
to create an ideal university of the future. What will it be? And it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting the response it gives because it really looks nothing like what we have today for higher education. It's accreditation is kind of out the window. It's really more about focused on career outcomes, focused on
Uh-huh.
skills, badging. It's on blockchain. You don't need a resume anymore. You don't really need
Mm-hmm.
transcript anymore. It's all digitalized. No, this is all ideal. But this is where I think the disconnect is between higher education as it is today and the
Mm-hmm.
consuming public is it doesn't always
Yeah.
make sense to Joe Average. Why do I need to go do this for 4 years? Okay. Why do
Mm-hmm.
I need to do this for 6 years? And so what can I do for 6 months that will get me to that next level of my career? I don't want to spend 4 years. I have a mortgage. I got rent to pay. I got a family to feed. I can't quit my job and focus solely on this for 4 years to maybe then
Mm-hmm.
get a better job. So higher education hasn't done a great job in general connecting the dots between why do you need these skills and what are those skills and then what those outcomes are. And I'll tell you where it gets lost and where it gets me really disheartened
Mm-hmm.
is listening to the generation that's really kind of a gig generation.
Mm-hmm.
They may work multiple jobs, kind of get get to the point where they say, well, I don't need school. I don't need to know how to do that. And then they come in once they realize they don't have a whole lot to offer as far as skill set to upward mobility in careers. And they'll say something like, I don't need to take English. I don't need to take math. I don't need to take social sciences. I don't need to take electives. I don't need humanities.
Mm-hmm.
I actually do. But if you know
Yeah.
how to write, you know how to read, you know how reading comprehension works, and you can go to an upper level complex class, and get
Mm-hmm.
that and navigate that class for yourself. If you can do complicated math already without foundations, go knock it out. There's ways for you to get through it. But what people don't
Yeah.
realize a lot of times is we actually have those lower level courses, those foundational courses. They're for a reason. They're foundational. They're scaffolding. Now, the cost
Mm-hmm.
time of that is where I think education disconnects. Do they need that amount of cost? Do they need that amount of time? And I think the answer that we're finding is no. Let's go back to what I talked about between the Europe model and the U.S. model. Europe
Uh-huh.
has 3 year college degrees, bachelor's degrees, 3 years. They don't have that fourth year. It's usually considered master's. And
Yeah.
NAU just happened to be one of the first universities to get a 3 year BSIT. Now, we use 3 years of vernacular. Doesn't mean you're going to finish in 3. The same way it doesn't mean you're going to finish in 4, but it is designed to reduce credit hours to be
Oh wow.
completed if you go full time in 3 years. What that does is it
Mm-hmm.
knocks off a whole year of credit hours. What we're trying to do here is say, look, we know your goal is to get to the career. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Goal is to make more money and go live the American dream. What do you need
Mm-hmm.
electives? What do you need that year for? If it's not giving you value, then let's
Mm-hmm.
just make you so you can go get the job. So we now have that program, and we're launching it in the next month. And I think
Oh
you're going to
wow.
see a trend towards that European model of 3 year bachelor's. I think that's going to be the next wave. Is higher education heard loud and clear from the general public. Don't make me take a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of courses that I don't see value in. That's true. But we got to do a heck of a better job on the higher education side in helping people understand that maybe you're not ready yet for those upper level courses. And what I don't want to see is people who come in thinking that they're a certain level of information or knowledge or ability and getting that reality check of, oh man, I haven't taken algebra, I haven't done algebra in 15 years. What am I doing? I haven't written a formal paper in 10 years. Circling
Yeah.
back, I think that's what higher education has to do a good job of leveraging AI to help teach people how to advance more quickly into being able to do those things. Because just like I use it every day for my job, why can't people use it every day to do their school?
Yeah. No, that's a great perspective. And we've talked about AI kind of being behind the scenes, helping with marketing, with admissions. But I kind of want to push the conversation into the classroom for a minute here, because there's this rising question a lot of educators and students are wrestling with. Can AI actually replace a teacher or supplement one in a meaningful way? I'm seeing on LinkedIn the other day, I was seeing a post where there are schools that have actually started implementing AI taking classes instead of a physical teacher being present. And I'm just trying to understand your perspective. Do you think this is something that can happen? And what are sort of the pros and the cons that come with this, right? Because I'm sure every perspective, specifically utilizing AI, definitely has both sides to it. So would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, this goes kind of back to that replacement paradox, right?
Mm-hmm.
you know, everybody's job is up for grabs by AI. What's the point? I don't think that we should look at it as can AI replace teachers. I think it's a tool. I think it can definitely complement because what we
Mm-hmm.
know is AI is a processing terminal. It's something that you teach and it learns very quickly and can compile a lot of data very quickly. So similar to how students once, if they wanted to interact with a faculty member, they physically had to go to the campus, right? They had to sit there and go to the lecture and do the give and take on that. And then online came along and there's a new tool. And there was a pushback because it wasn't in person and they felt like, well, you're not really connected. And then it went from being synchronous to asynchronous, which means that you never really met face to face or even virtually with your faculty. You corresponded with them in some sort of chat
Mm-hmm.
room, some sort of board, right? And so every level of this has been people kind of gatekeeping and saying, oh, well, that's not the way I did it, so it's not as good. And that's just human nature to say, well, you didn't do it my way, so you didn't do it the right way. Okay. Well, evolution's a thing and society moves forward. Sorry. So what I see is this is AI is a complementary tool, a supplementary tool to the interaction between the human and the human. I do believe that there's going to be a lot of base coursework that maybe will help lower the cost of tuition, cost of education for some schools, right? For the consumer out there, like we were talking about. If you come
Mm-hmm.
into the thing saying, "Hey, I want to advance my skills, and I really do need this degree for the next level, or I need some sort of credential to show in order to get into the career vertical that I want," and you're absolutely convinced that you don't need a formal 3 credit hour, 6, 8, 12 week course to do it,
Mm-hmm.
cool. I'm more than happy to say, here's a test out platform. Here's an AI class that's pennies on the dollar. Show what you know. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know the same amount of information, if you can demonstrate that you have the skill and knowledge that a 3 credit hour class is going to show me at the end of it when you pass it, then use AI to do it, right? So I see a
Mm-hmm.
vertical there where people can come in and you already have some of this out there and some of the massive online open cohorts, the simple learns, all those courses that are out there, is you're not actually dealing with a faculty member, but a faculty member, a curriculum developer, content subject matter expert created that curriculum. AI might be the delivery model. I see that
Mm-hmm.
helping us evolve how we teach. But at the end of the day, the input comes from a human. And I
Uh-huh.
see, again, going back to my comment about the premium of me, is I would want somebody who is an expert to be the person teaching me. And maybe AI,
Definitely.
maybe they can be the one who does it, but they learn from somebody else. And I think if we look at it from a classroom standpoint, I think in the classroom where the faculty is, the main brand proposition for a lot of schools is your connection between your students and your faculty is critical. I see that AI becomes more like a faculty aid in the classroom, something
Uh-huh.
that can interact and keep students more engaged in the classroom when the faculty can't be there. But I just don't see it replacing um, full faculty members. But you never know. I mean, it could happen. And I don't have a crystal ball, and it would be a sad day if
Yeah.
all of a sudden people were fully replaced by animated faculty members. I don't see it happening anytime soon. But a lot of that has to do with, again, the gatekeeping in higher education. I don't think higher education will let that happen, but who knows? It could be their doom if they don't evolve for it.
Now, that's a very unique perspective. And do you think universities have or should have a role in shaping ethical AI behavior? Because, it's not just using tools responsibly anymore, but kind of taking the responsibility and teaching the next generation how to question and work with these systems. Is that something that is being raised in the space? Because when we talk about AI in my workspace these days, the ethical considerations are definitely, things that kind of come up. So just curious to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing right now is, when it comes to AI, in my opinion, is what are you using to teach the model, right? And is that information proprietary? And so you'll see some lawsuits that are out there about them maybe harvesting information from copyrighted material that they didn't have ownership of, and then using that and passing it off as expertise in an
Uh-huh.
AI model. So I think that's a first line of what's ethical and what's not. Is
Yeah.
everything open for public consumption because it can be grabbed by an AI model and taught to somebody? And I would say no, because I think every day you're having people working to develop new theories, new approaches across the board on different sciences, different verticals of business. I don't think that there's enough social or public awareness of asking the question, how are
Mm-hmm.
we teaching these AI models? What are we doing, right? And who owns
Mm-hmm.
that? As far as the ethical implication of that, look, if what you use to teach the model is stolen content or is content that isn't proprietary or that isn't yours, but you're
Uh-huh.
teaching that in the classroom, I think that's a big ethical concern. I think it's not yours to
Yeah.
teach, right? And
Uh-huh.
so it becomes a question of who owns what. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, you run into a lot of, I think, more generationally relevant questions for some people. Again, the gatekeeping of, well, right now I don't like when students use AI to help write their papers, and it has to be formatted this way. look, if you're good enough at prompting and you understand how
Yeah.
it works, and you can get a paper out, and even if it's, a significant portion of it was rendered by AI, so what? I'm one that I just don't care, right? But that's going to piss a lot of people off who are more traditionalists in education.
Yeah.
And so I was reading
Yeah.
something the other day on LinkedIn that somebody said, "Hey, I love it when there's a paper that has a misspelling or comma out of place or formatting isn't exactly right, because it tells me that a human wrote it." Okay,
Mm-hmm.
we're going back to the value proposition of human interaction. So I think the ultimate question on the ethics of this is, if all AI ever does is replace and disconnect humans from one another, that's
Mm-hmm.
an ethical concern I have, because I think we have enough evidence recently, generationally impacted um, young adults and even emerging young adults here, younger children, on
Yeah.
social media engagement and disconnecting and fear of missing out and body image issues, and everybody and everything's polished and perfect. So the world isn't perfect. And if all you ever see is a polished, perfect image in your head, then it distorts your worldview and it can cause
Mm-hmm.
depression. And that's not who we are. That's not how we evolve. We need to be connected. So my biggest
Mm-hmm.
fear about AI is similar to that of social media and really being disconnected from one another. Is
Yeah.
I think it's an ethical question of how much more will this perhaps disconnect us, or does it have the potential to bring us closer together? And I think that if the answer, if done right, is that it's going to bring us together, then
Mm-hmm.
good thing. It's a great tool. I think that
Yeah.
online is both. I think I can talk
Yeah.
to people from across the world in a way that I would never be able to without it. But online
Mm-hmm.
also gives you a lot of things that disconnect us. It gives you misinformation. It gives you chat rooms of people who just do nothing but hate and troll and
Yeah.
spread misinformation. And so there's a duality of the wavelength. And my hope is that the side of light, the side of good, and better, we go and we fall to the side of doing the right thing as a people, as a society, and that
Mm-hmm.
side wins. Because if we cave into our darkest impulses, we've seen through history what the result is. So that's the ethical question for me. I don't think that's higher education specific. I think that's just my worldview on what I hope AI becomes and whether or not we can train it ethically in a way and use it ethically in a way, in the same way
Yeah.
predominantly we have with other tools, knowing full well there's going to be a
Mm-hmm.
segment, always is, of society that's going to
Yeah.
violate that code. It's going to use it as a tool of destruction or a tool to hurt or harm. And so the light has to win. So I'm hoping that we have some great minds working on this, or at least better minds.
Definitely. Brent, before we wrap up today, I know this has been such an incredible session, and I know I have definitely learned a lot, and your perspective has just been amazing. Before we kind of wrap up, I'd love to ask you one last question, and that would be, what's your advice to marketers today, especially those that are kind of, trying to stay relevant with AI everywhere and with attention that is so fragmented in this world, and the things that we kind of talked about with all the changes. If you could have one piece of advice for marketers out there, what would it be?
Learn where people are and meet them there. Um, I think there's a dangerous assumption in marketing, especially like higher education in general. And your worldview is your worldview, and it's really hard to see things differently unless you force and train yourself to do it. And so understanding that what you know and what your experience has been is one thing, but it's that walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. And so the challenge is that where you might be and what you might know, you can't project that on somebody. Okay. And so what I talk and train, just for example, our admissions team to do is find out where they are and come with them from their perspective, from that place. Don't assume they know, right? Give you a great example. Um, if you ask the average person out there that is not in higher education what accreditation is, okay, they're going to know that a school should have it. But I challenge you to get a better answer out of them on what accreditation is. And so we make a big deal about it in higher ed, and we should. It's important. But to Joe Average out there, I don't think they have really put the time and effort into it because it's just not a value proposition. But they know they should have it. And so let's not focus on that. What they're worried about is, all right, if I'm going to spend my time doing this, first of all, am I smart enough? Am I financially stable enough? Can I fit this into my life schedule? Does it mean I'm selfish if I take time away from my family? How am I going to do my job? 10 hours a day, my commute for an hour a day. When do I sleep? Understand where they're coming from and understand it from a marketing standpoint that the first thing you have to talk to is their nature, is their human. Where are they on their journey? Okay. And what you end up seeing a lot of, I'm here to gain interest of that market. I'm just going to tell them that we exist and that's great. But then what are you going to do next? Okay, you got their attention. What's their next step in their journey? You got their attention. They know you exist. They're thinking of it. They're in market. They're thinking about it. What do they do? Okay, and this is where the nuance is. And I think this is what's going to be the people who survive and people who do not as we change from AI. And that is, how do we get them from A to B? How do we get them from that next phase? I found out about it, but I got to get them to take an action. And so call to action is great. But I'm using things right now like, survey funnels or quiz funnels to try to engage people in something more meaningful, something more engaging that will then lead to them saying, oh, okay, I'm curious now about this. So meet them what they are, find out what they're curious about, talk about that, and then have an engaging story and use it from a perspective that they can identify with and they can answer.
Wow, that's such a wonderful perspective. And this has been incredibly, insightful today. We've been able to discuss not just the role of AI in higher education and marketing, but also about the responsibility that kind of comes with it and how do people kind of adapt with the change that is coming and is kind of here now, right? So, for anyone, Brent, that wants to kind of connect with you, know more about your work, how can they find you?
For me personally, I would just recommend coming to national.edu. That's
Hmm.
our website. And you call the phone number on there. You want to talk to me, you'll be able to find me. We're a close knit school. We're always accessible. I think that's where you're going to find the difference between NAU and a lot of other institutions is they all say they care, and I'm sure they do, but you're going to find out real quickly how we surround you. So if you want to talk to me, I'm always available. You can find my information on the site. You can call that number and somebody will transfer you over to me. If not, find me on LinkedIn. You have my name. I'm out there. But I'm always excited to hear, what other people are doing. I think you got to be open to learning. I think the scariest thing for me right now is that people who don't see failure as an opportunity, who don't embrace it as a chance to better or learn or do something differently. So
Hmm.
I want to hear from you guys if you guys are doing something outstanding in the higher education space or in marketing and vertical
Hmm.
in general. Reach out, let's chat, be good with it. And if not, good luck with what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Brent, for joining us today. This has been a wonderful session. And for our listeners, thank you so much for also listening. And please feel free to share your thoughts on the episode and catch us on our next one for, curious insights about AI, data, and what's happening in the marketing space. So until then, keep leading with clarity and let's build what's next together. Thank you again, Brent.
Thank you. Have a good day.